Monday, February 26, 2024. Would everyone join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I just wanted to give a notice that we did have an executive session this evening prior to the meeting to discuss legal and personnel issues. We're going to do it a little differently this time. We're going to start with presentations. And first up is Adam is going to talk to us about an update on the comprehensive plan.
All right. Can you hear me fine? Is this? Yep. Does this come up a little bit? Or? I'd love a handheld. That's great. Excellent. So thank you all very much for this opportunity to present the findings from the virtual community survey as part of the comprehensive plan update that we're currently undertaking. So a quick overview. My name is Adam Texa. I am the project manager for FHI Studio. We have been hired to undertake the update to the comprehensive plan. What I'm going to be presenting today is the first opportunity for people to engage with this planning process. It's not the last. We've had a lot of promotion out there, including posters and bookmarks and flyers, every door direct mailers. There were news articles and e-blasts, all really focused on promoting the comprehensive plan, what is it and what we're doing, but also to promote this survey. Many of you may have seen us out there at different, we call them pop-up events or different activities. We were at the Unity in Our Community event, the Pumpkin Fest, the Fall Fest, all with some activities and some information about the comprehensive plan. As a result of all of this work, we had more than 500 responses to the virtual workshop. Some people are calling it a survey, which is great. For a community the size of Radnor, that's a really great response rate. We had more than 3,500 total comments, and a lot of those comments were open-ended, responses to open-ended questions. I just thought it was very interesting that the sort of average comment length was 34 words, about 200 characters, or about the length of a tweet. So we've been going through a lot of information, and you'll see a lot of quotations from participants in this presentation. So a little quick breakdown of who participated. Obviously, most people who participated were people who lived in Radnor, people who shop and play and go to school here, people who work here, as well as people who own a business here. The age demographic was largely representative of the type of people who would participate in this. One thing that I always like to remind people is that people under the age of 18 typically don't participate. We don't get a lot of 10-year-olds who are taking this survey. And that group of 19 to 24-year-olds is largely represented in a lot of ways by college students who typically do not participate in these kinds of surveys. A lot of people who participated in this had been in Radnor for a very long time, more than 22 years, but we also got a very good representation of people who had been here a very short period of time, as well as people who've been here between 3 and 20 years. The income level of people who participated, this is of people who responded to that, was overly represented in households making more than $200,000. That said, it was very good to see representation from sort of those middle income groups. That group of people making less than $25,000 a year is a very difficult group to engage with, and we are talking with the steering committee about how to get them more involved going forward. In terms of where people were living or where people lived and where they participated, these are dots. We asked people to let us know sort of the nearest intersection to where they live or work. As you can see, really broad participation across the entire community. I always think it's important to remember that some of those areas where there are more dots, those are just denser places in the community. So some key takeaways. I'm going to spend about 25 minutes talking about these findings. So these are sort of the top level results. First and foremost, I think everybody recognizes people love Radnor. They are very deeply connected to this community. There are a lot of really important cherished assets like the senior center, the library, the sports and open space fields, the trail network. People really do love these elements. And people want to preserve a lot of these core characteristics. And along with that, there is some concern, you'll see throughout this, is some concerns about overdevelopment in the community. At the same time, there is a desirable for equitable housing solutions that attract and support a diverse demographic in the community. A lot of conversations about improving pedestrian and bicycle safety and connectivity, addressing traffic concerns. This is Radnor, so we've got to talk about stormwater. That's an important topic for a lot of people. And one of the things that I think is important to bring up is this idea of sustainability or resiliency is a topic that came up throughout our process and is really new, was not something that was addressed in the 2003 comprehensive plan. So I'm going to walk through now some of the priority topics, big ideas, and issue mapping questions or responses to those questions. So as a reminder for people who took the survey, there were 3 questions that we're going to address here. The priority topics, people were given 14 topics. They were asked to pick the 3 most important issues for them, to prioritize those 3, and then to answer an open-ended question about why that was their most important issue. People were able to share their big ideas, so a policy, a project, or a program, and then review and like other people's responses. And then people were able to use an online mapping tool to identify where Radnor could be improved, and then give some open-ended explanations about what needed to be improved there and what, if any of these 11 themes were addressed in or needed to be addressed in those spaces. So what you're seeing here is a sort of ranking of where people's top priorities fell. So their first, second, and third choices. What you can see is there was no issue that was an overwhelmingly top issue for everybody in the community. There were a couple of topics: open space, trails and recreation, neighborhood conservation, and environmental protection, which at least 1 in 3 participants felt like it was a first, second, or third priority. There's sort of a middle group of issues that came out here, and then a couple in the tail end, including sort of institutional relations, which were not a high priority for a large number of participants. However, if you start to sort of group these issues around the topics or the themes that are in your current comprehensive plan, you can see that housing, environmental and natural resources, and business and economic development really sort of stand out as topics or issues that at least half of all participants in our survey really saw as an issue. There's a sort of second tier here around mobility, open space, and recreation, and then the following topic areas. The point of this is not to say that we are not going to focus on all of these issues. These all are going to be important issues, but it does help to give us an understanding of where are a lot of people thinking about concerns, where are a lot of people thinking about their ideas for improvement. So I'm going to start with some of the themes that came out of the housing conversation. When it came to affordable housing, there was a strong idea from participants that housing costs were straining existing residents and pushing them out or sort of threatening to push them out of the community. There was a sense that affordable housing was an important part of maintaining economic and social diversity, that it was hitting younger and older adults the hardest, and that it was having an impact on the ability of businesses to sort of support and attract local workers. So you can see some quotes. I'm not going to go through and read all of these quotes, but I do think you should know that this will be online for you to read and sort of look into, and they're illustrative of the topics that we're here to talk about. So housing diversity. People wanted to see more housing options and a desire to sort of see a balance between rental and ownership options. So again, this theme of sort of aging populations, younger populations needing more options that don't exist in the township, the importance of maintaining a variety of living options in the community was really important to about 20% of the participants in this survey. And then neighborhood conservation was an issue. You know, there were concerns, as I said earlier, about what a lot of participants use this term overdevelopment. In your past comprehensive plan, there was some talk of mansionizations. But the desire was to preserve existing homes and sort of prevent scraping of existing homes and building sort of larger homes. Tied into this was a sense of sort of overcrowdingness, the aesthetic impact that this was having on the community, and the impact tying back to this question of affordability and affordability of housing. So when we talk about big ideas, we let people share their big ideas, and overdevelopment was, a part of that. There was a real sense of people, which I'm a sort of zoning nerd, so this was great to see. People said, we can change zoning. We can change the way we're enforcing it. We can understand and look at ways of restricting undesired residential development, especially sort of in historic neighborhoods and on smaller lots. And you can see there the ideas that people shared, as well as the number of likes that idea received in the survey. So those sort of better design standards, addressing some things like steep slopes and overdevelopment was a key issue here. When we asked people to identify locations where there were housing issues, you can see that there are some sort of hot spots of comments. So some areas along Conestoga Road, Wayne, which you'll see a lot here around Radnor Station, and then sort of in the Conestoga Road sort of business district down there, you see some issues there. People brought up here more questions of vacancy, property maintenance, and again, some of those need for affordable housing and over questions about overdevelopment. With respect to environment and natural resources, there was stormwater management was a really important issue that came out for a lot of people. People saw this and recognized that this was an issue of disruption and damage. There was a sense of that when stormwater becomes a problem, it sort of forces everybody to stop what they're doing and focus on that particular issue, which can be really disruptive. There was also a sense that this is having a big cost to some individual property owners, and a sort of recognition that they're paying a stormwater management tax and they're having to invest in their property, and some concerns about the costs associated with that. And recognition that stormwater management is very tied to the amount of impervious surface that your community has, and so a sense that there's too much paving in certain parts of the community where there's a lot of flooding. A real strong desire, so 34% of participants really felt that preserving open space and maintaining open space was an important issue. This was really tied to the environmental and community impact of tree loss. That was something we heard of over and over and again, was just the importance of trees in the community. There's also a real strong sense from people that the character of Radnor is tied to this woodland and bucolic sort of feel. That balance of nature and community is something that people want to preserve for future generations, and that tree canopy is something that people are going to be keeping a really close eye on over the next 10 years. With respect to business and economic development, a lot of people recognize that businesses are a part of Radnor's identity, that people really see not just Wayne, but all of the businesses in the community as an integral part of the community. There was some feeling that there wasn't enough support for local businesses, that there was a desire to address some of the vacant storefronts and enhance vibrancy and commercial opportunities to key corridors, and a recognition that businesses are an important tax-generating element within the community, and a recognition that there's a need to accommodate those users and grow those uses in the community to support its tax base. When we asked people for their ideas, a lot of people focused in, again, on zoning and better design standards, especially as it relates to Wayne. And so that's something that we'll get into a little bit in the area-specific conversations. But this idea that we need to adjust our regulations in order to bring in more economic development, bring in more vibrancy was something that a lot of people really sort of gravitated towards. Mobility, one of the top issues here was non-motorized mobility. So enhancements of the sidewalk network, the promotion of kind of a walkable community where people can feel safe, they can feel safe walking and biking, and sort of getting around in their community. But for a lot of people, this wasn't just connected to their mobility needs, their need to move around. There was also a sense that pedestrian enhancements and bicycle enhancements really are tied to personal and environmental health. So a real sense that these are go beyond just your need to move around the township. Again, not a surprise when we ask for people's big ideas. The idea of just building more sidewalks, more trails, more bike lanes, the work that you've done already on your trail network, I think is really well received. People really feel connected to it, and they just want to see more of it. That was a big idea that came across. Traffic and parking was obviously something that people cared about. A desire to see maybe closer planning around infrastructure and land use. The sense that traffic and parking does have an impact on the community and the and the environment, that there are areas where there's just not enough parking. We'll see that come up a little bit when we talk about Wayne. And then, recognition that there are issues with traffic and congestion, especially on Route 30 and Conestoga Road, sort of the roads that bisect the community. And then some questions about kiosks and the parking kiosks in Wayne, as well as handicap access. So the mobility issue is not a surprise. As I said earlier, we're really focused on Route 30, as you can see in kind of Conestoga Road. The sense of missing sidewalks, a lot of dots around speeding and traffic congestion. Those were some of the sort of focal points that people drew attention to when they were able to map their ideas. Open space, trails, and recreation. There is a real sense that outdoor spaces are an important part of health and well-being. The need to expand and connect that trail network came up again in this theme. Just sort of maintaining the trails, that these parks and open spaces are one of the biggest benefits to living in Radnor. It's part of people's identity around Radnor, and they want to see that maintained and expanded. When we talked about big ideas, there was a lot of preference for this expansion of green space in downtown in Wayne. People had ideas about providing incentives for like shade trees and how to better protect and promote open spaces, and a sort of sense that there need to be better enforcement of your existing ordinances. As you can see, the sort of areas or the hot spots around environment and open space are a little bit more dispersed. A lot of these comments had to do with maintenance, erosion quality, sort of improving the plantings, a lot of stormwater comments here, and a lot of discussion about underutilized spaces. With respect to historic preservation, people really see historic preservation as a way to connect to Radnor's history. They see it as part of the community's identity. And I think what's interesting here is some people see this as a way or sort of an antidote to some of the new development that's coming in. It's a way of balancing sort of growth going forward and new development, new changes in the community with being rooted in sort of its historic character and culture. As I said earlier, sustainability and climate change was actually not something that's part of your current comprehensive plan. You don't have a healthy discussion of this. And that's because it was done in 2000. It was not necessarily a topic that comprehensive planning efforts were addressing at that time. Today they very much are. And a lot of your residents are seeing this as a really pressing issue. A lot of the comments focus on this as something that's not something you can push off for a couple of years, that it's something that needs to be addressed now, and that the severe climate and weather risks, the sort of carbon footprint of the community as a whole, were really jeopardizing the future of the community for future generations. As I said in community resources, you have a lot of community resources that people cherish. I would say of all the comments, of all the things that we heard over and over again, the library, your senior center, your sort of core institutional services are things that really attract people, and they really loom large in the minds of your residents. So it really they really seem to be the cultural hubs, the places where people come together and make community. And so I think that's something important to pay attention to going forward. Institutional relations, this was only something that about 3% of participants felt like was a pressing issue, but there was some concern about the impact of these sort of larger institutions on the local community, and the impact that they, the ones that are not paying taxes, the impact that they're having on the sort of services and the priorities that they're getting in relation to their tax contributions. So there were a couple additional topics that we didn't put out there, but I think are really worth focusing on. As we were reading the comments, one thing that jumped out at us is seems to be a real desire to update zoning and to make sure that your existing regulations are enforced. A little bit of surprise, we don't normally at this stage get a conversation about zoning, but that's really great to hear that people are paying attention to these issues. And then the number one comment was about putting wiring underground, and sort of a sense that the utilities and improvement to utilities are an important topic to many residents. So now I'm going to talk about places. What we asked people is we gave them a number of places, and we asked them what they would like to see happen in those places. Would they like them to be preserved, enhanced, evolved, transformed, or were they sort of indifferent, or did they not know? And this is a result of that. So we asked it about 5 different places. And there are a couple of things that I want to sort of highlight here, is that there are a large number of people who were pretty indifferent about the Radnor Financial Center, the Conestoga Business District, or just didn't have enough information in order to answer that question. So I think that's going to be an important topic if those are areas that this comprehensive plan focuses on. Education is going to be an important issue there. When you look at the Wayne Business District and Lancaster Avenue, what you really see is a preference there for enhance and evolve. So not sort of leaving things exactly the way they are and not totally transforming them into something different, somewhere in between there. And you can see there's sort of a little bit of a split between enhance and evolve in both of those areas. So with respect to the Wayne Business District, people do see this as the economic and social center of the community. Like I said, they want to see it become a hub where there are businesses that are thriving, the residents can come together, where you can sort of attract a diverse retail environment, real desire to see improved streetscapes, new green spaces, build new open spaces, improve that pedestrian realm and address some of the traffic in the area. A lot of conversation about parking in the Wayne Business District. A lot of desire to encourage more diverse businesses, and again, getting back to those zoning and infrastructure improvement areas. I do think that it's important, so this is a heat map of all of the comments that came in terms of sort of locations and places that need to be improved, and a large concentration of them were really focused in on the Wayne Business District. So something to really pay attention to. This area seems to hold a sort of large stake in people's minds about what needs to be addressed in the community, and the comments in Wayne really focused about housing, historic preservation, open space, mobility, design, land use, really span the gamut of types of comments that came in that area. In terms of the I-476 interchange, a real sense of just improving the landscaping, addressing traffic and congestion in that area, a desire to sort of address some of the aesthetics, but really focusing more on the preserved and enhanced rather than the transform. In the Conestoga Road Business District, again, preserving those historic resources, improving the infrastructure, bringing in a little bit more vibrant businesses, but a real recognition in all the comments that there needs to be this sort of blend of residential and commercial spaces, and a recognition that those residential areas are very close to the businesses here. And so the opportunity for conflict or spillover is really big. In the Lancaster Avenue corridor, obviously traffic is a real concern for people, but a desire to see maybe a little bit better balance of land uses, improving landscaping, and overall sort of improving the aesthetics along Lancaster Avenue. This is probably the area that people were the least happy about generally in their sort of comments. The Radnor Financial Center, again, it's important to remember that a lot of people didn't know what they wanted to see here or didn't care. They were sort of indifferent. But the people who did respond here, this was really a lot of comments about transformation. So a lot of people talking about this as a possibility for a new town center, allowing mixed-use housing, sort of building art center or performance venue there, creating more green space. There was a lot of creative ideas that were brought to bear around the sort of Radnor Financial Center. People were thinking really big about that space in comparison to some of the other areas that we focused on. So with that, I'm going to pause and take a sip of water. I'm very open to any questions that you all have about our process to date.
Thank you. That was a very nice presentation, and there's a lot of information packed in there. Can you tell everybody where they can look at it and digest it?
Absolutely. So if you go to radnor2035.com, if you go into, it's called the library, there's a tab at the top. There's a recording of this presentation, not this exact one, but a similar one that I've done, as well as the slides from tonight that you can go through and you can scroll through and read.
Excellent. Anybody else? Questions? We've all heard it a couple of times. So.
Great.
It was very nicely done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Chief, are you going to want the handheld?
I think I can use this.
Okay. So next up, we're going to have Chief Flanagan and the Community Support Unit give us a presentation.
Just have them fill in on the side. Good evening. Very importantly, Radnor community. I know all of you are here to hear our presentation, so we're very thankful. Acknowledge the Radnor Board of Commissioners and the Township Manager, Mr. White. In 2023, I believe Resolution 2023-56 was a history-making change for the way we do policing and, most importantly, serve the Radnor community. I acknowledge that, and you're going to hear the hard work of the team that's standing to my left. With this ability, we have really changed what we do and how we do it, and we'll be making a very specific presentation, which I am extremely excited about, and it actually has passed my expectations. Before I get started, and I'll let Sergeant Lunger introduce the unit that works under his command, I'd like to acknowledge two people. First is Keely Seymour, a resident from Radnor Township who jumped on board, canceled her whole calendar, and helped do interviews and helped set the stage for what a good counselor would be, and she certainly helped steer us to an excellent counselor. Number 2 is Sergeant Dan Lunger, who was picked by the command staff, sort of an unlikely character, strong and quiet in stature, but he took this opportunity to bring this team together, and it's just awesome. And just so you know, his dad was a lieutenant in the police department here, so the tradition continues on. I will now turn it over to Sergeant Dan Lunger.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you for the time to present tonight. I'll introduce the unit. We have Officer Jen Coco, Officer Bill Meyer, Officer Nick Rentos, Officer Caitlin Karmelovich, and this is our licensed social worker, Isabel Cook. 17 years ago when I started in police work, programs like this did not exist. But I think as we've evolved and grown as a profession, we've seen an increase in the need for social service involving police incidents. And while I don't think that you can replace police with social workers, I definitely think there's a space for us to work together to better service and give resources to the communities that we serve. So I think going forward, I think Chief Lanning is really ahead of the curve here. I think you're going to see a lot more of these units implemented in police departments across the nation. Basically what we did when Isabel started was we took her to roll calls to introduce her to all of the men and women who work here, all the officers, explain a little bit about what her role is and what her capabilities are. So basically that's what we're going to do tonight is formally introduce Isabel to the community. I will say there's a couple things. There's some incidents that we're going to elaborate on as much as we can. As you can imagine, Isabel deals with a lot of sensitive information, so we do have to respect people's privacy, but we will elaborate on what we can and what she feels comfortable with. And so with that, I will turn it over to our licensed social worker, Isabel Cook.
Hello, good evening. So my name is Isabel Cook. I'm a licensed social worker, like Sergeant Lunger said, this is the presentation that we have presented to all the officers about myself and the community support unit. So a little bit about me. I've worked as a social worker for the last 10 years. The primary populations I've worked with have been with domestic violence, sexual violence, mental health, substance use, and veterans. I am licensed in Pennsylvania as a social worker, and I'm also trained as a psychotherapist as well. The definition of a police social worker, defined as a specially trained and educated professional that promotes social change and development and engages people to address life challenges and enhance their overall well-being and development. They can provide counseling and crisis response support to community members referred by police officers, work within a police department or work at a social service agencies with law enforcement officials, respond to mental health, substance use, domestic violence, and unmet social needs, and also provide resources for officer wellness. Some of my roles and responsibilities: providing support and assistance to members of the community in need within the context of law enforcement, collaborate with officers to provide crisis intervention and de-escalation, assessments, referrals, and community engagement. It can be utilized within a department as a resource for wellness for officers. Collaborate and work with community agencies and providers to bridge the gap between law enforcement and community members in need. Especially trained in crisis intervention and de-escalation. Can link community members to appropriate referrals and resources, and reduce recidivism of certain community members and their use of law enforcement. So this is just some progress so far. So we've had 203 referrals since the inception of the program, which was October. My official start date was October 2nd. Primarily mental health and domestic violence incidents. We've developed partnerships with the Domestic Abuse Project, Delaware County Victims Assistance, MVP Recovery, Bryn Mawr Hospital, Mearmont, Embark Behavioral Health, Cornerstone Wellness, the Office of Mental Health, and Delaware County Department of Health, and Radnor School District. We have developed the Community Support Unit. Officers have undergone specialized training in crisis intervention and trauma, and they'll continue to do more specialized training to be able to respond to those incidents. We've been introducing the unit to various community agencies and providers, trying to figure out how we can work together and collaboratively for the community. I have my own reporting system separate from the officers, just because to protect the confidentiality of the people I'm working with. So we got the contract for that, and we've also written a policy for the program as well. Our goals are to reduce recidivism of high-risk community members within the law enforcement, connect community members to resources more quickly, reduce follow-ups and time spent by officers in incidents where I can assist, and provide ample support to officers in appropriate incidents and calls. So these are just some charts from each month since we started. Mental health and domestic violence are obviously our biggest calls so far. We have gotten substance use, sexual assault, and also dual incidents where there's two things happening: mental health and domestic violence, substance use and domestic violence. That's just comparing last year and then this year so far. Last year is blue and then this year is orange. Some specific examples. So we had a domestic violence incident. In this incident, I was able to provide support and case management to an individual who obtained a protective order against their spouse. We were able to collaborate with the resident and the district attorney's office regarding violations. They were very overwhelmed. We were able to kind of be that liaisons. They didn't have to call 911. They could call me, so they felt supported and not overwhelmed in that process. They were able to come to the station and meet with me, and I was able to talk them through that process. Another one was a burglary. We had an individual that was burglarized. They were very emotional, overwhelmed, very fearful of what happened. We were able to field numerous calls with that individual regarding their safety concerns. We were also able to assist them in getting security cameras, walking them through that process, and helping them install so they could feel safe in their home again. Another incident was a domestic violence and mental health incident. I was able to offer to be a liaison between the department and this resident regarding this ongoing incident between them and their intimate partner. Was able to provide de-escalation support to the resident. I was also able to go to court with them to offer emotional support, kind of walk them through that process and what they could expect with that experience. We also had a mental health incident. We were able to provide on-scene support to an individual that was experiencing a mental health crisis. We provided guidance on the 302 process, which is the involuntary commitment process, and supported the family through that process from when we went to the house all the way to when we drove them to Crozier and got them connected with the resources at the hospital. We've also been able to continue working with them to provide community referrals for more appropriate levels of care for that individual. We had a substance use incident where we provided on-scene support to the individuals involved, and we advocated with the hospital in terms of treatment options and kind of guidance around their arrest. We also provided ongoing emotional support and advocacy to that individual. And the final incident, another mental health incident, we were able to support officers on scene to an individual that was having mental health concerns. We were able to advocate with the hospital to provide support to the individual while we looked for alternative placement options for them. And we were able to work with the hospital to find them a long-term residential facility for them that was a more appropriate place for them and safer ultimately. So some benefits. I can spend more time with community members, allowing officers to go back into service to other calls. The ongoing collaboration with various community agencies to best support residents within Radnor Township. I can provide longer-term case management and therapeutic support to high-risk community members. I can bridge the gap between law enforcement and community members and create collaborative relationships within the community, and establish and sustain beneficial relationships and partnerships that'll benefit everybody in the community, hopefully, and their overall well-being. Just also wanted to mention we do have the police chaplains program. We have been working with them. So they serve members of the township and the PD by creating with local faith communities. Faith leaders can respond alongside police officers to provide emotional and spiritual support for both during times of crisis or turmoil. They are available on an on-call basis. They work collaboratively with myself and the CSU, and I've included their contact information. That's also on the website too. And then Sergeant Langer is going to just talk a little bit more about the community support unit specifically.
Okay, so in addition to Isabel, we do have the 4 officers that you met earlier. And they work 7 days a week, and they work 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. In doing, the command staff conducted a study, and we found, checking our records management system, that the majority of our incidents and calls were between those times. And we also identified our most densely populated areas as far as vehicular traffic, pedestrians and businesses, as a corridor of Route 30, as the high-density area. These officers split that into 2. They're split into groups of 2, and that's their primary area of responsibility. Now, their number one priority in the community service unit would be taking Isabel to calls that that the officers need her assistance on. It's called co-responding, I think is the term that a lot of people use. Isabel will actually respond to an incident in progress, not only conduct follow-ups when she is here, and she works Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So during those hours, if an incident happens, whether it's a mental health issue, domestic issue, and Isabel's services are needed, these guys take Isabel to the scene so she can actually be there during the call. We said we just conducted a 2-day training, receiving specialized training in trauma, dealing with victims of trauma, and also de-escalation. And they are responsible for calls within that high-density area. Another facet to the unit is they will be conducting follow-ups with all victims of crime that occur within Radnor Township, no matter how small that crime is. Part of their job is going to be to follow up with that victim to make sure they're receiving the services they need and that they feel safe. So every time you're a victim of a crime in Radnor, you'll be getting a call from, if it's not the officer investigating the incident, one of our community support unit officers will be following up with them to make sure that their needs are being met and taken care of. So, and I will say one thing on Isabel, before we wrap it up, she has been phenomenal. I really cannot speak highly enough of her professionalism and her expertise. And we are thrilled, and we made a great decision hiring Isabel. She's been terrific. Do you have anything else? That's all. Thank you very much for your time, guys.
We want to thank you, all of you as a team, because I think it's really an innovative and around here a little bit of a groundbreaking move to have a support unit like this within the police force. Thanks, Chief. Thanks all of you for diving right in. It's wonderful. And Isabel, thanks. Hats off. All right, we're going to move along here. We're going to start with some general public participation. I think if you have an issue would like to speak to that's on the business agenda, you might want to wait until then, but you can speak now if you like. So, public participation.
Good evening. I'm Bob Gilmore, 427 St. David's Road. Still working on the 60 West process, and upon becoming a party to the proceedings, I did not initially realize that prohibition of any interaction with elected officials due to the assumed appearance of a conflict of interest would effectively result in any interested party being deprived of any meaningful communication with the township. The township offered no alternatives, such as an informed interlocutor, my term, who might have filled the communications gap in some limited capacity. As you know, the only options for questions, expressions of concern, constructive criticism, or finding of errors and omissions were via written submissions with the 22 January 2024 cutoff date, or 5-minute sound bites, like we have now, at public meetings, determined by a seemingly arbitrary and contrived protocol. Requests for information from the only representation residents have has either been denied or ignored. There is absolutely no way of knowing whether the documentation provided by those following the rules imposed has been included in this application file, let alone even be looked at or read, as there is apparently no file in the Open Records Office to confirm same. Following the second presentation PDF, it became obvious that the release was not only disorganized, only partially followed the format of the initial presentation. Drawings were added, documents deleted without notation, and again, the required documents excluded. I don't know if this will come up or not, but we can continue. These required documents have been noted vocally and in print for weeks by me, all on top of the degraded drawings and related text through the reduction process. If confusion was the intent, it certainly was achieved. The appearance of intentional selection of what might be a minimum enforcement appropriate release and the assumed retention of significant required information necessary for application approval is based solely on what has been presented and the documents not released either intentionally for whatever reason or because they were never delivered by the applicant, which may well be the reason the 7 missing documents requested to be here tonight for review are not here. The appearance of a veil of secrecy, but the appearance of not a veil of secrecy, but an opaque shroud of secrecy, and process being run fast and loose suggests that the documents as presented do not satisfy the application requirements. Choosing to ignore or override the Township Code application requirements goes well beyond minor oversight and certainly the transparency the Township professes on its website. Therefore, it is not necessarily the design concept, but this process that should be put on hold at the very least until such time as the code requirements are met. However, if there has been no delivery of the required documents, then the onus and delay is on the applicant per code. Thank you for the opportunity yet again to try to make the documented point that this body is apparently being disingenuous in the conduct of this application approval process. Thank you.
Come on up.
My name's Burke Fitzpatrick. I'm from 402 Locust Road in Wayne, and I was here at the last meeting, and I've been to many of the meetings that the Parks and Recreation Committee gave. And I have a question. Are anybody from the Park and Recreation Committee here other than Tammy? I didn't think so. So one of the things I'm going to recant from the meetings, we never got a chance to present at the beginning of the meeting. And one of the meetings, and I appreciate the opportunity to present early on here because the people that really want to say something don't want to be filibustered so they have to leave and don't get anything to say. One of the meetings, we waited for 2 hours before anybody could speak, and in that 2 hours, 90% of the people left. At those meetings that I attended, I didn't go to all of them, there were 37, 38, I don't know, a lot over 5 years. At those meetings, I only saw 2 people that showed up to voice their dislike of dogs off leash. After the meeting, one of those people said, yeah, I shouldn't go there. It's not a good place for me. The other person was an older grandmother who took grandchildren out there, which I can't believe it, on a trail that goes up and down over rocks and over hills. She was in her 80s. Those were the only 2 people I ever heard complain, except for one other person that I met on the trail who had a dog very similar to mine, who has him on a leash. Wonderful dog, a yellow lab, and he complained that his dog got bit in the ear. I didn't see any scar or anything. And the other thing is there's very few discussion about Harford Park. That is a dog park. Skunk Hollow is not a dog park. Harford is a park where dogs are unattended by their owners. They sit and chat. My dog was there once and got raked. Still has a scar on his eye from when he was a puppy. That's where the dogs are problems, at parks where the dogs are not with their owners, unattended. That's where the problem of excrement is not taken care of because the owners don't follow the dogs. So I will say that I'm very fortunate and I love it. I go there early in the morning, so none of this affects me. And I have no problem with restricting dogs and putting them on a leash, except that when you have two dogs, like I do, I had three, but I never brought all three because one was uncontrollable. I couldn't bring her there. Two dogs on a leash, approaching two dogs on a leash on a narrow trail, it's not a good idea. Again, I don't think it's a bad idea to say, okay, dogs are going to be on a leash, but that doesn't solve the problem that I think you're trying to address. I don't think it's really clear the problem that you're trying to address. Dogs will still jump on people even though they're on a leash. So maybe you say, well, dogs shouldn't be there for certain times. Again, the ordinance is stating that it's from 12 to dusk, Saturdays, Sundays, and township holidays. I think that punishes the people who work on the weekends and can't take their dogs in the morning, doesn't give them an opportunity to go and walk their dog off the leash afterward. So maybe 12 to 5. I don't know. But I won't belabor. Again, I want to talk about the presentation on the township plan was awesome. Nothing but data. Nothing but data. The only data that we were ever presented with was, well, we got a lot of emails. There were a lot of incidents. They never said what an incident is. Commissioner Abel last meeting pretty much exposed the incidents. They were an incident is a phone call or an email. There were 50 incidents in 5 years. That's 10 a year. 2013, there were 18 incidents. 4 of them rose to the level of a police report or response. Of those 4, I would feel more safe if the dogs were on leashes. The second one, I don't feel safe and we'll find another location. Jeep shows up and all the dogs jump out. Please require leashes. These are not incidents. I didn't hear any dogs biting somebody where they had 37 stitches. They had to go to the hospital, terrorizing this, terrorizing that. Again, I don't have a problem with trying to control the dogs. Don't bring your dog if it's a bad dog. Period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. You seem really prepared, so. Well, I'm as loaded prepared as I can be. John Aiken. I live at 116 South Bellevue Avenue, and I have lived in Radnor Township since 1951. And I know something about the small-town character of Wayne and the schools and the businesses and such. A couple of folks have given me a little extra time, but I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible.
Would you prefer a handheld mic?
Excuse me?
Would you prefer a handheld mic so you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have to jump back and forth?
Thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness. I'm speaking, okay, that works. I'm speaking to obviously the Bellevue condominium project. When this first came to notice, I received this, is the camera on? Okay. When this started, I received the legal notice from Radnor Township that there was a submission for the condominiums in the parking lot at the AT&T building, And
Mr.
this,
Aiken, could you center it a little bit, and maybe push your other stuff over? That way Ian can zoom in on it, because we can't really read it.
yes, thank you. In here, the Concordia Group is submitting an application for development of the parking lot at the AT&T building, the 40 West property, located at West Avenue within the Wayne Business Overlay District. When I read this at the time, and it said West Avenue, I had no idea that this was going to involve Bellevue Avenue or the parking lot across the street. And apparently, the applicant proposes to develop the property as a special use area in accordance with Section 280-53.17, which I'll get to momentarily. At one of the meetings, I received these. These are a listing of various boards that have to approve a development. And apparently there's a couple of other boards, a planning commission and a design review board also involved in this. And sometimes I don't know which board that I'm dealing with. At one of the meetings, I had asked one of the witnesses about emergency access to the property, and I was told that they had received a memo from the fire marshal at the firehouse, and I got a copy of that. Now, I don't know if all of these issues have been addressed, whether it's water pressure for fire hydrants, access for fire apparatus and emergency vehicles, and I don't know if these issues were addressed or if the township or the applicant received a document from Aqua regarding water pressure and water availability. I don't know if those were addressed or not. I was going to focus on three things this evening, and I don't really need to go into the missing or non-existent impact statements, especially on an aging infrastructure, specifically the sewer condition, some of which is, does anybody know how old some of the sewers are? Are they 100 years or more? They're quite old. They're older than me. And by the way, I'm very privileged to stand here and speak to you, and I was extraordinarily fortunate to grow up in Radnor from 3 years old to 76, attending the schools. I had a small, yes?
About 1 minute.
Will that extend into the minutes that Liz has given me?
If you have another resident that wants to read, that's fine.
Okay. I'll try and move more quickly. This proposed building these are artist renditions of the proposed building, and this is the building right here, and here's the bike shop in Wayne right there. And this I don't recognize any of this as Wayne as I look at this. This is a close-up shot of it. And Bellevue Avenue, I'm on Bellevue Avenue, and it's right down the street, right over behind that car, which apparently doesn't have a driver in it. So I'm assuming it's an autonomous vehicle, of which there are more than a few in these pictures. And we also have cars parked on the street and people walking around. And part of what the applicant of this project here wants is to encourage walk around in Wayne.
Mr. Aiken, you could have someone else, another resident, continue your presentation, but you yourself can't go on longer. You could speak when we actually go to vote on it. You could have another 5 minutes when we get to this segment of the agenda.
Just so everybody's aware, you get 5 minutes of public comment.
I
Now,
had checked with a couple of folks. I thought I would be able to extend it, but not have another person pick it up.
Someone else would have to, another resident would have to pick it up.
Did any of the previous folks have more than 5 minutes?
No, I gave you an extra 30 seconds because I interrupted you twice, so. There will be more time when it's on the agenda, or when we get to that part of the agenda.
I hope so.
All right, let's continue with public participation.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Alex Davis, and my address is 22 Aldwin Lane in Villanova, where I grew up. So I am currently in my senior year at Rutgers University studying urban planning and design. And as my contribution to the discussion around the comprehensive plan, I would like to talk about Radnor's zoning code. So to me, the purpose of any zoning code is guiding development pressure in a way that benefits the community. And the most widely accepted strategy across different communities is to corral development into a corridor of density where it will be space efficient, transit accessible, and best served by existing infrastructure. So in Radnor, that would mean we would, of course, downzone Skunk Hollow, the surrounding areas, and we would upzone Lancaster Avenue. The problem is that Radnor's zoning code doesn't really do that second part. So the vast majority of land close to the train stations is zoned for low-density, single-family housing. And even in the Wayne Business District, as we've been discussing, every new housing unit must have a parking space, and buildings are capped at 3 stories, except for exceptions. So these are, why is this bad? So these are hard caps on density in exactly the place where dense housing should be encouraged, ideally. So for instance, the Concordia Group has proposed what I think is an excellent example of the type of mid-rise development that we should be building in this location on the AT&T parking lot. Now, I think it's a perfect opportunity to bring more customers and taxpayers into Wayne and also put them right next to the train. Now, I know it's not affordable. That has been an objection. But if you do want affordable housing, there's an easy way to get it. You just offer the developer a chance to build more stories up in return for affordable units. This has been done in other communities, and this could be a win-win for the community. Now, I know that construction anywhere in Radnor of anything is, it can be controversial, obviously. But there are so many benefits to targeted density that are often lost in these discussions of individual projects. So we know from the survey that FHI Studio just did and was so great to present today that Radnor overwhelmingly wants to preserve green space. That is why we should legalize space-efficient apartment housing in places like Wayne that are already developed. Radnor overwhelmingly wants us to meet our climate goals. We talked about that a lot. That's why we should legalize dense housing near train stations where people don't have to drive everywhere. And Radnor overwhelmingly wants a balanced budget. That was also talked about. That's why we should let more taxpayers live in dense places that need less infrastructure per person. Radnor overwhelmingly wants a vibrant downtown Wayne, and that is why we should let more people live there. If there were more apartments, I just want to mention, maybe the Anthony Wayne Theater would still be around. And most of all, Radnor values a walkable community. This is another thing that was brought up. And that is why we should allow more housing in these kid-friendly walkable neighborhoods like Garrett Hill and Wayne that make Radnor such a great place to raise a family. It is easy to say no to development. That's usually what happens. And in some cases, that's totally appropriate. But as we take a second look at the zoning code along Lancaster Avenue as part of this comprehensive plan, it is my hope that this board and the Planning Commission will consider saying yes to denser housing, yes to walkability, and yes to a more sustainable and financially secure Radnor. Thank you.
Thank you. More public participation.
Good evening, Al Murphy, 627 Glen Murray Road in Radnor Township, 40-year resident. I'm here just to provide a little of information, not development related, something that I've had the opportunity to work on with Maggie, with Shade Tree, and with Public Works. I've got copies of the letter here. Maggie already has seen it. My wife and I, 2 weeks ago, got a letter from PECO saying that they're going to cut down one of our trees. And the letter basically gave us two options. We can cut it to the ground, or we'll take it down to about 15 feet so it doesn't interfere with our lines. I learned through doing some homework that the township is not notified of this. They don't require it. They need to notify the homeowner. Interestingly, a lot of people are away in the winter, and what if that letter came in? They gave us 5 days to respond. If you're away in Florida, if you're some other place, what exactly is going to happen to the tree? What we find interesting about this whole situation is it's a 39-inch, 4.5-story heritage tree. It is not in the right-of-way or anywhere near the power lines. It's actually on our property across the street from the power lines. And they didn't give us any options, so great response from the township, particularly Public Works. Public Works reaches out to PECO, and they say, oh, no, the homeowner has full discretion in order to decline this decision to cut the tree down. The letter doesn't say that. The township is not notified that this is happening. So my question tonight is, A, how many other homeowners have gotten a letter like this? It's really interesting to see if they have, and if they're not around, what's going to happen to any of their trees. And driving around the township, I find that what they're doing is they're marking trees with little orange ribbons indicating they're going to take them down. There are a couple of others marked on St. Martin's Church on their property, some of which you could see makes sense. But the reality is that the whole communication pattern, the letter's not correct. And I wanted to inform the township that this is going on. Apparently, under the PUC code, they don't have the responsibility to notify the township. They do have the responsibility to notify the homeowner. However, the letter is ambiguous and it's not clear. And I have to tell you that for about a week or two, until we got this, we think we got it resolved. We were pretty unhappy having a heritage tree cut down. So my job here is to let you know tonight this is going on. I would think that it would be interesting to find out if we could go back to PECO. Maybe we understand we have a great relationship with PECO, is to go ask them and see how many residents actually got letters, and to let them know this is out there, and in fact they have discretion. There is something called property rights. PUC's important property rights override that, and I think the township should be aware of that. Thank you for your help.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. As I said, there will be more time as each item comes up on the business agenda to continue public participation. The consent agenda tonight, is there any item any commissioner would like to pull?
Yes.
Commissioner Agnew.
The first one is the $8 million settlement fund, Mr. Tate.
So you're, just to let him know, you're doing item A?
Item A, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's the AP disbursements list.
Right. So we were wondering, or I'm wondering, that $8 million settlement fund, and then there's a disbursement of $3,500. What is that about?
That is a payment to the vendor who services and provides us our enterprise-wide system for the township, financial, licensing, permitting, our overall software system. That was a module upgrade. That was the invoice for the module implementation and data conversion upgrade that was just recently paid.
All right, so, and the $8 million settlement fund, is that, did we settle something with somebody? Is that I don't want you to reveal anything you can't reveal, but that's what I'm.
It was a fund created back in 2013. It was a result of a settlement, and there was an allocation of a certain amount of funds that were put into that fund and earmarked for specific uses, one of which was information technology needs of the township.
Okay.
and that helped provide for the conversion to the software platform that we currently operate on.
Okay. And the second one is, what is GOB 19 Project Fund?
That is a fund that was also created in 2019 as a result of a borrowing, a bond issue, and those proceeds were specifically identified on a series of projects. And there are still some funds remaining, and those expenditures just a couple weeks ago were some inspection fees on a couple of projects that there were some punch list items that were being closed out, and the inspection company bills us, and we pay for that out of that fund.
And GOB means?
General obligation bond.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any public participation on this one issue of the disbursement list? No? So could I have a motion for item A on the consent agenda, the AP disbursement list?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any other items any commissioner would like to remove from the consent agenda?
Item E.
Okay, item E is Resolution 2024-11, authorizing E-Force compliance and ProShred Security to conduct an electronics recycling and paper shredding event on October 26, 2024, at a cost not to exceed $15,000. Mr. Foster, you want to take this one?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Usually in the fall, right before leaf season starts, around October-ish, we usually conduct the shredding event. It's a partner of two different companies. One is E-Force, they handle the electronics recycling, and the other one is ProShred, which handles the paper shredding. When it comes to those two partnerings, the electronics event with E-Force, it usually totals about $2,500 to take care of all the electronics that the residents in the township bring forth. And ProShred totals about $2,400, and that gives us about 2 trucks. And usually, if they need both, they're there if they need, but sometimes we only have to use one.
Okay, Commissioner Abel, some questions?
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, Ricky. So does the township have an agreement with any companies to do e-recycling?
We do have Retriever through the township that residents are able to call if they want things outside of this fall event. They can call them at any times to do any recycling event, but they would have to pay for those opportunities when they do call.
And is that service available one day a year, or 2 days a year, or every day of the year?
Whenever they would call, yeah, every day.
So the township currently has a service with this group Retriever that's available year-round?
Yes, sir.
And you said there's a charge. Is there a charge on every e-recycling item, or is it just the bulk items like?
They would charge as a whole. It's by the weight. So they do one blanket. That's why it's $12,000, and everything that's collected, whatever comes up, is put into that.
What's $12,000?
To handle E-Force, to have them come out.
Oh, I'm asking about Retriever.
Oh, I'm sorry, Retriever. I thought you were talking. What was the question again?
Is there a cost for a neighbor to call Retriever to pick up e-recycling?
It's no cost to call them, but whatever they want to get rid of, there is a charge for that. And I don't know the charge for the items that they want to get rid of.
Okay, yeah, I think there's a charge maybe on some of the bulk, like old TVs that are, some of those bulk items. But, in the past, I've voted against this service because to me it's duplicative of a service that we already provide. I don't know that the government should be responsible for e-recycling, especially when we have a service that's free of charge to the township and to the neighbors for the most part. I mean, there might be some nominal fees for some large bulk items. So again, I will vote against this. I think, I would prefer that the township really push Retriever. There is a link on the website, but I don't know that if you put in e-recycling in a search function, I don't know that it's popping up. So I will work with the township to make that more available and more recognizable to neighbors. So hopefully that neighbors use this year-round, and you don't have to wait till one day in October to recycle your electronic material.
Any other commissioner comment? Jim, you have your light on. Do you? No. I would just add that I don't think it's free retriever. I think that they charge you to come and pick up anything. Is that right?
Yes. I think some, again, I mean, I would have to check, but in the past, it's some items, some service calls are free, and then there's some items that have a fee involved.
Mr. White, do you have?
Yeah, we pulled up the Retriever
Yeah, I
site,
have
and
it.
their fees for Pennsylvania and New Jersey include a $12.50 doorstep fee, plus convenient fees for items that are particularly hard to collect. Those fees include $15 for a microwave, $38 for each flat TV, less than 33 inches that use a cathode ray tube, or a CRT, and then $105 for each TV or computer 33 inches or higher that use the CRT, or for each wooden cabinet. And then there's $55 each for a dehumidifier, window air conditioner, and a mini refrigerator under 50 pounds. So that's what they include on their website as fees for those pickups.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other commissioner comment? No? All right. I'd like to make a motion for Resolution 2024-11. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All right. All in favor? Aye. 5-1. All right, the remainder, I didn't ask for public comment on that. I'm sorry. Did anyone want to address? Sorry.
Burke Fitzpatrick again from 402 Locust. Just for information, Staples does offer a free service to get rid of most of your electronics. Now, when you get to the bigger stuff, but computers and laptops and things like, you can go to Staples for free. I know Retrievers does cost money, but for the township's information, it's free at Staples.
Thank you very much.
Once a month, you can take it.
And Pico will haul your refrigerators and dehumidifiers and all that.
Thank you. Do we have to vote?
No.
The remainder of the consent agenda. Can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second? Thank you. Any public participation on any of the other items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I have a vote? All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to the business agenda. Item A is the adoption of Ordinance 2024-01, an ordinance of Radnor Township, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, revising Chapter 115 of the Radnor Township Code of Ordinances, Animals, Article 3, Control of Dogs and Cats, Section 115.7, Dogs at Large, and by revising Chapter 205, Parks and Recreation Areas, Article 1, Section 205-4, Restricted Activities, as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Board at their December 2023 meeting, per a motion of recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on dogs at Skunk Hollow Parks and Trails. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second. Second. Tammy, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, President Myers, thank you very much. At the last meeting, I gave a detailed presentation on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Board. This was a topic that came up in October of 2020. It started, the genesis of it really started with regards to dogs in and around the Willows Park, and then really started to morph into a discussion with regards to Skunk Hollow and Skunk Hollow Park and Trails specifically. We looked at the boundaries and the overlap of the two sites, those that utilize the trail system throughout Skunk Hollow, of course, park at the Willows, in the Willows property proper. And as the discussion started to ensue over the months, we started to solicit feedback from members of the public Again, it was a discussion that started during COVID on a Zoom meeting in October 2020, and it really carried through all the way to just this past December 2023. So a lot of time, a lot of discussion. I think it was about 35 meetings we had total in discussing at the Parks and Recreation Board, specifically on the Willows and Skunk Hollow. We did have some conversations on some other parks, and that's on a to-do list to come. So the Parks and Recreation Board, I want to thank them for their time. They really spent a lot of time, effort, and energy on this. Prepared a presentation that really did a full analysis of the codes and looking at that and hearing from the public. We know that there have been a lot of quality of life issues. We've also had some concerns with actual police incident reports. In terms of those over the years. I know, having served the department for the last 25 years and fielded a lot of those calls over the years, at times it's been overwhelming, and there has been a lot. I would say arguably, one of the biggest sources of feedback that we do have in the department stem from dogs and dog situations that happen at parks, specifically in the Skunk Hollow trails. And seeing a lot of the events starting to grow at the mansion with the lease that we have with the WPP, and a lot of the usage of the trails that has increased over the last several years. We have definitely seen an uptick in feedback. Again, a lot of these are quality of life issues with regards to dogs. There are specific incidences that have been brought forward with regards to dogs and dog bites, dog on dogs and dog on people. And so throughout that process, the Parks and Recreation Board did come to the resolution that they provided to this board that we went through in December that really has a restriction on the weekends and the township holidays in which you had outlined. In addition, had noted that this would be something that would be evaluated on a yearly basis to see how it's going. I know one of the requests of the Parks Board was to continue to understand what the feedback is as we move forward and understand what that looks like and understand what those incidences look like as we go forward, so that analysis can continue underway to see what the future holds. And also, we had noted one other item during that was to, when we do have specific events out on the trails, to actually close the park off to dogs. So that those events can take place. And really, at this point, it's been one event in specific. We have a scavenger hunt where we have preschoolers that we host at the site right around the Halloween time. And so there's one event, and I think most of the dog owners have all been really great and ready to work with us on that, recognizing that sharing the space is really important for folks who aren't out there necessarily, with a dog and want to enjoy a program out on the trails and experience all that site has to offer. So I know I speak on behalf of the Parks Board in appreciation of all the time and all the members of the public who have come out to the meetings. I think in our April meeting, we had, probably full room here, bigger than this. And just want to acknowledge their time and commitment and energy that they put forth in asking the Board of Commissioners to consider this ordinance development and change.
Thanks for the good summary there, Tammy. Do we have any commissioner comment?
I have one amendment, and that would be to the time for clarity, that it's instead of 12 p.m., it should say 12 noon or noon, whichever, as we've talked about the confusion.
So you want to make an official amendment?
I do.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. So what we have is to keep the ordinance the same with simply amending 12 p.m. to 12 noon.
Yes.
Or could we just say 12 p.m. noon?
That would be fine, 12 p.m/noon.
Yeah.
Fine with me. She's had it both ways. We keep changing it back and forth on her. So, all right, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any other commissioner discussion on any other topic of this ordinance? We have to vote, yeah, okay. Let's vote on the amendment. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So 5-1, it will go, the ordinance will be amended to say 12 p.m/noon. Now, is there any other commissioner comment on this ordinance? Any public comment?
I've got
Oh, I'm sorry.
a few comments.
I'm sorry.
And similar to my comments last time, I will be voting against this adoption. Personally, I looked at the data. I didn't see, the data to me didn't rise to a point where an ordinance change was necessary. If there were concerns in the park, I think the first step would be new signage that maybe spelled out the rights and responsibilities of dog owners, and take a look and see if that would address some of those concerns. I have concerns with enforcement. We have ordinances currently on the books that are not enforced in our parks, specifically those parks where dogs are not allowed. I was at a park this weekend, 3 signs that said no dogs allowed. I was there for 90 minutes. I saw 6 dogs walking the track. In addition, where you're not supposed to run a business out of our parks unless you have a permit. I saw personal training going on at those parks where I don't believe those businesses had permits. So to add another ordinance to the books and expect that to be enforced, I have high doubts. And then some of the comments from last meeting, and then some of the comments from tonight, I'm really concerned. What's going to happen next year or the year after? I have a feeling that we're moving to a point where dogs off leash are not going to be allowed at Skunk Hollow, and maybe for extended periods of time, no dogs at all. So. I hope we don't get to that point. But you know what? If you have 6 calls next year that say we're concerned that dogs are in Skunk Hollow, and that has been used as the criteria to put this ordinance forward, we could get to a point where you're not allowed to have a dog off leash at Skunk Hollow, and I would hate to see that time.
Any other commissioner comment? Public comment?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce the lot of discussion about data. Data. We have all these incidents, 50 incidents in 5 years. That's 10 a year. What happens if I go to a baseball game and I decide to jump on the field and I run around like crazy? They're going to take me out of the game, and they're going to take away my season tickets. If there's a bad dog, you go to the owner and you tell him, don't come here. You come here, you will lose the privilege. The problem is bad owners and bad dogs. It's not the leash. We had a lawyer last week, 2 weeks ago. He came here and says, look, leashes don't work. He built dog parks. He went to a law school where they taught animal law. He knows more than I do. We have reference to the Board of Health. What does the Board of Health know about dogs? I know more about dogs than the Board of Health. We talk about excrement. We, as responsible dog owners, will pick up our excrement. If we miss it, we'll pick up somebody else's. There's no discussion of Harford Park. That is where there are problems. The dogs are not under control. The owners aren't with their dogs. That's where all the incidents occur. Again, I just will say 50 incidents in 5 years, 4 resulted in police involvement. You're going to get a lot more calls.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nick Smitel. I live at 124 Wooded Lane. I did not move here for the dogs. I moved here for the schools. But I think living in a neighborhood where there's a lot of barking dogs, I see those dogs are not exercised and they're behind a fence. And to everyone's point, and to Mr. Abels, is all these incidents, when's it going to stop? It's just like a very undog-friendly area. We talked about non-walkable trails, no sidewalks. Now, where do you expect us to walk our dogs in? And off-leash provides more exercise than any time I can walk the dog on pavement. And then in the summer, these dogs, it's very hot, pavement's hot. I shouldn't be in the sun that much. And you want me walking my dog. Here I have a shaded spot with water. And when I'd love to see how many people are actually using Skunk Hollow after 12 o'clock when there's no dogs. I mean, the room was filled with dog owners last time I was here. I see everyone has dogs. And I personally have not seen an incident. I keep my dog under control as well. And so you're saying, what's next? A child that misbehaves on South Wayne Avenue? You're not going to allow children on South Wayne Avenue? Is that the next step? Because I do feel there's no dedicated dog parks. I mean, you have Hartford, but it's not fenced in. Here, we can walk the dogs. We talk about lack of sidewalks and how important open spaces are. Here, we have a gem in this area where you can take your dog off leash, get exercise, and you guys want to put limits on that. And plus, from what the non-dog owners have the entire Willows, and then they also have more time to walk with their dogs than the dog owners. I get it, there should be limits, but from 12, I mean, I know there's other parents here. I have child activities. I can't always get there by 12 o'clock on the weekend. So now you're going to limit the one time I have freedom from not working a job. So I would ask you all, not just Mr. Abel, to rethink this resolution and come up with some better ideas. Thank you.
Hi, EJ Long, 446 Barclay. Moved to the area 6 years ago. I'd like a show of hands of how many people up there own dogs. So all of you people are voting on dog laws, and none of you use the park or walk your dogs at that park. I will tell you that dogs on leash come up against a dog on leash are more aggressive. Dogs off leash solve their problems on their own. There is very seldom, and I walk there multiple times a week, I've been in no altercations with dogs at all. They smell each other, they know how to deal with each other. There's a hierarchy in the dog language, and they do very well at it. It is a park that the dog owners supervise themselves. I think we're making a big mistake on this. Thank you.
Any further public participation on this issue?
About the cutoff times, you're cutting off at noon, but I think in order to make it accessible, because you also have dog owners who, they work at night. Oh. Ed Arney, 126 Radnor Avenue. Yeah, I just think that we're sort of disenfranchising a section of the population. The time that you have with your dog in the park is incredibly precious. Like, it's not just, what's developed in Skunk Hollow is a community of people, and that's why you're going to see such a passionate fight. It's not just the entitlement of, I'm allowed my dog to run free and crazy. It's the dogs interact in a way that is. It's not reproduced anywhere else. It's not. You're not going to get it in a penned-in dog park, just the way like a nature walk is not the same. It's like a basketball court. And I think that sometimes people only have these weekend hours. So I think if you have a cutoff at noon, then the people who work at night, people who work alternate schedules, then the 9 to 5ers, which are just as much a part of the community as everybody else. Will be kind of cut off from that morning time. So just to have like maybe a wintertime schedule if you have your peak. Like I don't really agree with the leash ordinance to begin with, but if you really want to carve out a peak hours like 12 to 3 o'clock, give the nighttime people at least a window to get out there with their dogs and experience that time, because it is precious, and just allow them to have that opportunity. And I would agree with everybody else here who's, I don't think that leashes necessarily make anything safer, especially people who have multiple dogs, like older people who don't have an opportunity to walk multiple dogs. You're not going to have like 4 or 5 leashes, different sized dogs, and then you have an interaction where these things get tangled. The dogs are more aggressive. It causes a number of problems. So yeah, that's.
Thank you. I do want to point out that we are talking about less than 20% of the time frame that this park is open, being opened to people who might have a fear of dogs, who might be disenfranchised themselves because they cannot go on this park, which has reportedly the only place in Radnor Township with trails like this. So,
But they have the whole rest of the park also. And when do you expect us to walk our
okay, you've spoken. All right, we're ready for a vote? We ready for a vote? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Against? We're going to take a 5-minute break before we get started on the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to people. Thank you.
Good to see you, Nate. Have a good night.
Okay, let's start to get everyone together. Commissioner Mulrooney should be back in a minute. Thank you. The next item on the business agenda is item B, which will be to vote on the proposed order for the 60 West GP conditional use decision. Mr. Rice, you want to start us off on this one?
Sure. So let me just recap where we are with the conditional use application of 60 West GP. The board held 4 hearings, took testimony and evidence from the applicant, from several residents. During the 4 nights of testimony, October 18th, December 5th, December 19th, and January 8th. The board then accepted any arguments, any findings of fact, any other documents prior to the board's last meeting 2 weeks ago. And several of the residents submitted additional arguments and suggestions and documents during that time period. The one thing I just want to make sure everybody's clear about that process is these are evidentiary hearings. So if you want to present something, you have to do it during those evidentiary hearings. It's not an ongoing process. You've got to be able to do that in the context of those hearings because we have a court reporter there. And this is not a procedure that the township has just created. This is something that's required under the municipality's planning code. These hearings are treated as evidentiary hearings. Board of Commissioners act as judges to some extent, and they can only make their decision based on the evidence and testimony that's presented, not on anything else, not on subjective opinions, just on the testimony and evidence. And I've said this at several of the hearings, and several residents have called me about it, and I've explained this process over and over again. So it's a complicated process. We have another one of these going on in the township. And the same process is being used. This is not something that was just arbitrarily created for this particular application. This is in the state law, and we have to abide by it. You know, my role is to keep this board out of trouble in terms of their final decision and make sure that the final decision is based on testimony and evidence. So what's in front of the board tonight is a proposed order, which I had prepared at the board's direction. And what the order will do is it's an order that would approve the conditional use application of 60 West GP, subject to 17 conditions. And I'm going to read every one of these conditions so it's clear what they are. And these conditions, I think, address a lot of the issues that have come up. So let me just go through these conditions, and then there'll be public comment, after the reading of the conditions, and then ultimately the board will vote on this proposed order. Condition number 1, the applicant shall comply with all applicable township ordinances and shall submit a land development plan pursuant to the township's subdivision and land development ordinance prior to the construction of any facilities. Applicant's land development plan shall take into consideration the special use area factors that are set forth in section 280-5317B of the township zoning ordinance. Condition number 2, the number of residential units permitted for the project shall be reduced to no more than 45 dwelling units. Number 3, the building facade for the project shall be consistent with the existing architecture of the Wayne Business Overlay District by incorporating brick and stone into the facade, which shall be reviewed by the township's Design and Review Board during the land development process. During the land development process, the applicant shall meet with a representative group of neighbors on a monthly basis or as often as the neighbors and the applicant can agree to provide progress updates on the plan and construction activities. Applicant shall consult with the neighbors group on the proposed architectural style, the facade materials, pedestrian improvements, and public accessibility to the proposed green space. Condition number 5, the applicant shall maintain the existing green space and street trees along Lancaster Avenue and Bellevue Avenue frontages of the property in a manner to be approved by the township, and shall set back the proposed building from Lancaster Avenue and Bellevue Avenue to maintain the green space and the trees. The green space shall be publicly accessible during the process. Number 6, the building setback from Lancaster Avenue shall be increased to a minimum of 65 feet from the center line of the road, and the building setback from Bellevue Avenue shall be increased to a minimum of 30 feet from the center line of that road. Condition number 7, the applicant shall make a capital contribution to the township for traffic and pedestrian improvements in the areas adjacent to the property in an amount of $10,000 per dwelling unit to be utilized for infrastructure or other improvements within the township's sole discretion. Payment of the contribution shall be done according to a schedule established by the township during the land development process. Condition 8, the applicant shall divert stormwater runoff from the existing AT&T building parking lot on the east side of that building to the proposed stormwater facilities for this project. Number 9, the applicant shall resurface and stripe the existing AT&T parking lot on West Avenue and shall install parking islands, landscaping, and surface stormwater facilities in a manner to be approved by the township engineer. Condition 10, the applicant shall perform a sewage capacity certification study of the township sanitary sewer system and shall perform a stormwater infiltration and inflow study on the upstream sewer line tributary to Midland Avenue. In the event of excessive I&I, the applicant shall undertake remedial repairs to mitigate the I&I at the direction of the township. Condition 11, applicant shall perform a pedestrian connectivity study during the land development process and shall study traffic circulation and parking congestion during the late afternoon and evening hours and shall identify potential improvements. Condition 12, applicant shall install a green roof for the project in order to mitigate stormwater runoff from the roof. Rooftop occupancy for any residential or recreational purpose shall be prohibited unless approved by the Board of Commissioners during land development. Condition 13, the proposed mixed-use building shall be LEED certified in accordance with the neighborhood development criteria of the U.S. Green Building Council unless modified by the township during land development. Condition 14, prior to land development approval, the applicant shall secure in the name of the township and for the township's benefit a lease for the AT&T parking lot along West Avenue for public parking use in a form substantially the same as the township's existing lease for the existing Bellevue Avenue parking lot. Condition 15, the applicant shall install a sprinkler system for all underground parking areas in a manner to be approved by the township's fire marshal. Condition 16, the applicant shall secure an emergency access easement through the adjacent AT&T property between the subject property and West Avenue. And condition 17, in the event the applicant or successor entitled does not receive land development approval within 3 years from the date of this decision for the project, this approval shall be void, and the applicant or successor must seek reapproval from the Board of Commissioners. So this is a proposed approval with 17 conditions, and there'll be public comment on this, but just for me to make one other point, this is the zoning part of this process. There is a land development process which will take longer than the conditional use process, believe it or not. It'll probably take a year to go through the land development process because of all the other permits that are required for this project
before any ground gets broken. So this is a proposed decision with 17 conditions. It's based on the record that was made in this, I believe. And at this point, Madam President, maybe public comment?
Yep, let's open it up for public participation.
Hello. My name's Elizabeth Reed Maratea. I'm on Francis Avenue. And I want to know, are they going to be required to do an EPA study of the land before they develop it?
It's not a question and answer.
Well, let me just comment. I mean, there's going to have to be, you said EPA land? Yeah. Yeah, there's something in Pennsylvania called Act 2. It would be DEP that would require the soil to be tested. And that's something that'll come up during the land development process. Okay. It's not part of this decision at this point. Okay. Yeah.
Any further public participation? Say again? Any further public participation?
Excuse me. My name's Jeff Pearsall. I live on West Beach Street Lane in Wayne. I've lived there continuously now over 40 years. And I've lived in Radnor Township pretty much since the 1950s. I'm always very concerned about the town of Wayne and in all respects. And I commend Mr. Rice and all of, for those 17, what would we call those? Conditions, I guess, yeah, 17 conditions. I had a load of things that I was really ready to come up here and make sure that you heard, and he answered almost, I would say, 90% of them. But I will just reemphasize my concern, and they have been addressed. So I don't feel like I'm talking to the ceiling. My three concerns in any development, but this one in particular, are the density. Density is a major problem everywhere we go. And I'll cite the one place over in King of Prussia, you all have been over there, at the monstrosity of that Wegmans, the Valley Forge Golf Club property. There's way too many things there. And that underlies my concern for any development in our township, which would go, up to the Dorrance Estate, which is kind of on its way now. And also, as we move forward towards things such as any of the golf courses, one of which was kind of up for sale a few years ago, we really must tighten up on what we allow in these spaces. We cannot allow development that goes just from ramshot. Radnor's been notorious for really doing a pretty good job with that, and I commend you. So density, this property is too dense. It's been brought down to 45 units. I commend you for moving the lines in from the street so that there's more open space on the side of the building and in front of the building. Those need to be green spaces, which has been addressed as well. So green space is my second thing, which goes with the density of the property and the size of the property. And then my third thing is just the architecture, and that has also been addressed in these conditions. So I'm glad of that, but I want to make sure that people, as we move forward toward that land use plan and so forth, that those three things, I mean, there's a lot of other things that I probably could do, but I think those three are paramount to almost anything here. So, as I say, I just wanted you to be aware. On the architecture, my last point, and then I'll go. There was a talk in several of the previous meetings that the people wanted to try to meld to the middle of Wayne, especially where like the Dunkin' Donuts is and what they did on the top of those buildings there. I thought that was done very well, and it would be nice to run that same type of facade or whatever right through the corridor, right through the main business corridor as much as we can, which takes planning beyond just this one project. but we can start with this project to make sure that this is not some modernistic architecture. I've seen the pictures, and I'm not really impressed. I'm impressed that it's a nice design, but it does not fit the character of Wayne, which is a Victorian village that goes back into the mid to late 1800s, and most of the town, or at least the town center, is Victorian, and it should reflect a historical aspect as opposed to a modern aspect. One last thing on the density, and I'll go. The gentleman spoke earlier, and I appreciated what he said about the housing and the density of housing and how we're trying to bring in affordable housing into our community. He suggests that we allow buildings to get higher so that we can get more people in, so the cost of the unit is less for the rent and so forth. That's commendable, and I'm for affordable housing, but I'm sure not open to 6, 8-story apartment houses. I know we're not going there with this one, but as we move forward, please do not go in. This one actually is, from what I understand, 1 story higher because of the special land use, and I'm not in favor of even that, but I understand, I guess that's where that all came from. So I thank you. As I say, please consider my considerations, but I believe Mr. Rice has addressed a lot of those. And I plan, and I'm sure people here will plan to be part of those land, whatever it is, the planning commissions or whatever, meetings as we move forward to make sure that a lot of these things really get done. And thank you.
Thank you. Further public participation?
Just a quick question. I don't want to waste everybody's time. Could I approach Mr. Rice later for clarification on item 4, 8, and 13? Would that be possible, rather than have him repeat it now and waste everybody's time?
Yeah, we can talk after this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Further public participation? Mr. Aiken, I know you're coming up. Want the handheld again?
Yes, please. John Aiken, 2.0, I think it is. You know, in the first fellow that spoke here on land use and building and density and parks and everything, much of that would dovetail with what I want to cover. If I may approach the bench briefly, this will be a drawing that I have worked on. It's a draft. It is not. Here, and Mr. Rice. I have one for you too. Talk about a big idea. Don't open them. All right, well, you're going to go ahead and open them. Okay. This is the building as proposed of the 60 West situation. Now, here, Wayne is hardly recognizable, and this is the building right here. This is I don't know if it's a photograph or a painting. This is Bellevue Avenue, which in the early presentation of the fellow with the beard and the patch group, I lost the train of thought. This is Bellevue Avenue, a very small street. In this photograph or painting, it looks like they have enlarged, and this sidewalk is done differently. So it looks like property was taken to widen the road, and this is right across from my house. It's the only entrance onto this property. I am of the opinion that if this project goes as it is, it's a piecemeal square peg in a round hole, and the Egyptians knew something about square pegs. They used a square hole. All right, I'm going to try and cut to the chase here. This is a rough draft. It is not in proportion. It is somewhat to scale. I didn't have time to do a fuller drawing of this. Okay, here's paperwork. Okay, this is the roof of the proposed building, right here, with the grass on the top. Of course, I was wondering who's going to mow the grass, and what if the ravens and hawks want to make nests up there? This is a ground floor right here, and these are units, condominium there, and these are retail spaces in this area. Now, I'm going to have to skip a bunch of detail because I did a square footage comparison. This is just a concept that I roughly drew out of goes into the big idea of the early presentation. This is a module here, and it's made up of smaller modules. Each one of these here is 20 by 20 by either 11 or 10 feet. This is an exterior stairway going up the building, and I didn't have time to do more on this. And on these porches, so to speak, or these patios, these units could be made off-site as a module and put together like Lincoln logs or Legos, so to speak. This outdoor stairway would double also as emergency exit. I took elements from Lancaster County with some of the farms. You got a lot of wood there and sort of stucco and things. And this is Bellevue Avenue. Oh, okay.
You have about a minute, sir.
What?
A minute left.
That's just enough time to say thank you and wrap it up. Did you time anyone else? Because
time
one fellow
everyone.
did go over 5 minutes.
I time everyone. Sometimes I give a little leeway if I interrupt, so.
Do I have any time left?
Yes, you've got 45 seconds.
Okay. In conjunction with
minute.
this, and these tall trees would be nice to look out the windows to see green all year because they're perennials. There would be ground level parking. There would be underground storage units for the residents. The retail and commercial would be on the east side of the property, not the west side, which is right across the street from us and is going to wreak havoc with us in traffic. Some residents with small business could also be retailers in the building. I would want to see all of the retail outlets moved over to the east end and hope, if this goes through piecemeal, what's going to happen with the AT&T building down the way? Is the Concordia Group involved in the future of AT&T and that additional property? Nobody knows?
All we know, Mr. Aiken over here, we know that they have a right of first refusal. They don't have a contract yet. They just have a right to maybe buy it in the future. That's
because we're going to go through this in 5, 10, or 15 years. Now, hopefully, I will have made my exodus and won't have to do this because this is not what I would have wished on myself in the winter of my life.
Well, that building is not in the special use area, so keep that in mind. That's not.
Are we going to be tested? Are we going to be tested on your 16? That you gave a lot of information there.
Well, let me finish because your time's up, probably up, but. Everybody that's a party gets a written copy of this. Once it gets signed and finalized, everybody will get a written or email copy of this decision. So, this week. Yeah.
Well, I'll say good night and thank you. And I thought it was important to not just to contend against this, but to also provide some alternate possibilities, which I did at several of the meetings. And I think this design could be adopted, it would work, and it would soften the blow, it would reduce some of the traffic, and a bunch of other things that I don't...
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, I put a lot of time into this because I wanted to have some intelligent responses, and basically all I've done here is shown that I'm on a fool's errand.
All right. Any other public participation?
Hi, thanks for the time tonight. Joe Dow, 302 Audubon Ave in Wayne. I haven't been as closely involved in the process throughout, but I did have a few different points of feedback around the proposal, and I appreciate the conditions listed in the proposed order. I think they address essentially all of them. I think maintaining the setback and green space on Lancaster Avenue, enforcing architectural style, building materials are all really important elements to the design. I like the idea of the green roof as well. I appreciate that there's more to this process to play out and more opportunity to provide feedback on the specific design, but appreciate the consideration of the township's feedback. Glad that it's in line with kind of my personal feelings. And while Wayne has plenty of issues with excessive curb cuts and surface parking and too much asphalt and not enough greenery, this project can't solve all of those. This is taking an existing surface lot, putting it to a higher use, and doing it in a way that fits within an appropriate boundary and design factor, in my opinion. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. Any other public participation?
Good evening. My name is Mary Packer. I live at 27 Fairview Drive. I, too, am delighted to hear the 17 conditions. They do address a number of the issues that I have. But I listened to the survey that we opened with tonight, and I heard open space, open space, open space. And in 2003, when we did that plan, it was open space. And we're putting up a very large building. And while I appreciate that the number of units is reduced to 45, I think it could have gone a little further, but I wasn't at the table, so not much I can do about that. I think there are missed opportunities. I'm disappointed that there wasn't a way that we could figure out as a township how to work with AT&T. It seems to me that we just perhaps didn't have our eye on the road. But I could be wrong with that. Maybe we did and we couldn't do anything. I look at towns like Media, very old history. They've done a wonderful job of maintaining the downtown, and then all of the additional housing that, condos, townhouses have all gone out in the outer part of the city. I don't know if anybody had the pleasure of being in Wayne on Saturday. It was like Times Square. You couldn't get anywhere. There wasn't a spot in a restaurant. You couldn't get in the bookstore. You couldn't find a parking spot to save your life. And so I think to myself, well, if that young man has his way, he's putting apartments right next to the train station. I don't know where all these people are going to go. It's just, we're already kind of at capacity, or it certainly feels that way. Infrastructure obviously is an issue, and the height is obviously of great concern. The other thing I think I would like to see us focus on is diversity of businesses in downtown Wayne. Right now we are a little small town of restaurants, and only restaurants. And while that's wonderful, and I personally can't get into any of them right now, but it's lovely, but it's really not diverse. So I know it's not easy in the retail world, and brick and mortar, not popular, but it would be really nice if we could return to a town that has restaurants and small businesses that can support Little Leagues and CYOs and all of the things that help towns stay towns and communities. So I thank you for what you do, and thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Hello, excuse me, Ryan Breyer, 203 West Avenue. I too am very pleased to hear the 17 conditions. Mr. Rice, could you just repeat condition 14 for me, please? I was trying to jot down everything really quickly. I think that was around the public parking lot. I just wasn't clear on what the condition was.
Prior to land development approval, the applicant shall secure in the name of the township and for the township's benefit a lease for the AT&T parking lot on West Avenue for public parking use in a form substantially the same as the township's existing lease for the existing Bellevue Avenue parking lot.
Great, thank you. I couldn't help but think through the comprehensive plan update that beyond the people that sat in this room for the last 4 sessions and the concern they raised, it became very clear in that presentation that residents of this township, beyond those that came, have the same concerns. Every red dot in that presentation was exactly where this proposal is being put forth. But I'm very delighted to hear about the 17 conditions. Many of them address the concerns that were brought. The one in particular that I would encourage the board to play a lead role in is the creation of the neighborhood group. I love the idea. I worry, though, that if the applicants left to create that group, they sat here and said the neighbors were engaged throughout the process. And I think it became clear through the evidence that was submitted that it was unclear what neighbors were involved in that process. So I would just encourage the board to play a lead role in creation of that neighborhood group so everyone that lives in this general area can be well represented. So thank you for everything you've done throughout the process. I know it's been a long 4 sessions, but clear, like I said, I'm glad to hear the 17 conditions were put forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public participation?
Thank you.
All right, let's then start with a motion to, oh, I'm sorry. Just trying to get a motion and a second in there.
Mr. Rice, could you repeat condition 10, please?
The applicant shall perform a sewage capacity certification study of the township sanitary sewer system and perform a stormwater I&I infiltration and inflow study on the upstream sewer line tributary to Midland Avenue. In the event of excessive I&I, the applicant shall undertake remedial repairs to mitigate the I&I at the direction of the township.
So I guess we have a question on this, just for clarity's sake. We believe the first half of this we've already done. We submitted a study in December. We believe that is the sewer capacity study. And for the second half of this requested condition, is there any way to get additional clarity on exactly kind of what this conditions mean? We'll obviously review the conditions if we get them, but from what we could gather, most of them are quantifiable. This one seems a little more open. We're looking for just an understanding of what exactly the request is there for us. Beyond, and I guess beyond the fact that we again submitted that initial study, it did show in our report we believe there's capacity there. So from the I&I perspective, just an understanding of what the township is looking for.
Well, I think Mr. Norsini can address it. The study has been, as you said, Dave, it's been submitted.
Yeah.
It was submitted last year. And Mr. Norsini, I know, has reviewed it with Roger Phillips. But he can address the, what the intent of that condition is, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. So, Mr. Falcone, the capacity study, whether approved by the township, still has to go through DEP. So we just want to make sure that that's fully known. As far as the I&I, the intent was for the lines that carry sanitary sewer waste from 60 West to the easternmost manhole on Midland Avenue, request the I&I study of those lines. So basically an I&I study of any lines affected by the development.
So as I understand it, and Steve, you probably know better than I do, and Rob probably does as well, there's a requirement to, when performing a study like that, to get into manholes and to do things that are within the township's right-of-way. And how...
We give you permission.
And we appreciate that. So is there, with respect to, and I think this was addressed a little bit in our initial study, that we believe there are some I&I kind of issues, not necessarily with respect to capacity, but maybe existing conditions in the pipes of the township. And so I guess what we're trying to get an understanding of is, are we being asked to mitigate our impact on these or address existing conditions that are downstream from our?
It's to address I&I in those lines, right?
Okay.
Any other questions? You're good? Okay, I need to go back here and get a motion to approve the proposed order prepared by the solicitor, Mr. Rice, in regard to the 60 West GP conditional use decision. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Do we have any commissioner comment at this point?
There was one thing that I wanted to add. There's a fee that is being requested as one of the conditions, and I'm going to say that the genesis of this is that there was a resident group that asked to have a sidewalk installed on West Avenue. And that didn't make it into the hearings that we conducted. This request came before we had the hearings. My understanding is that there is not unanimity among those residents on that street, and as a result, we may not be able to install a sidewalk there without a condemnation that I don't think that the board has the appetite to go through with, or just telling people you need to move your trees and fences and everything else that have been put in the existing right-of-way, which again, I don't think the board has the appetite to do. To the extent that the board chooses in the future not to install a sidewalk, I do want to stress the importance of keeping the funds in this general area. It is not going to be fair to ask the applicant to pay a fee in order to offset whatever effects it has on this particular area and then use those funds elsewhere in the township. We're a taxing authority, we can raise funds elsewhere, we can bond funds elsewhere. These funds, I think, need to be dedicated to this little stamp of land that is going to be affected by the building that's being put up. So that's my request to the board, that we just remember that 3 years from now when we actually do something.
Is the language, what is it, adjacent to the property strong enough for you?
Yeah, I think so. I just, the funds, you know, the money's all fungible, and I want to put something on the record that I'm advocating for my guys, basically, in the area.
Other commissioner comment? You have your light on. No? Okay. Commissioner Abel.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on Commissioner Larkin's issue there. Mr. Rice, can you read that condition on the $10,000 per unit?
You have a copy of this in front of you, right?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Let me find it. This is condition number 7. The applicant shall make a capital contribution to the township for traffic and pedestrian improvements in the areas adjacent to the property in an amount of $10,000 per dwelling unit to be to be utilized for infrastructure or other improvements within the township's sole discretion. Payment of the contribution shall be done according to a schedule established by the township during the land development process. So it is,
so
so
it
it is,
can
it's
only be-
earmarked for the area.
So it can only be used for, as Commissioner Larkin said, a sidewalk or some traffic improvement.
For any infrastructure, whatever the township determines, you know, with whatever feedback from the neighborhood, but it's in that area that it's earmarked for.
Okay, and can a future board come in and take that money and decide it wants to do something else with it?
I would say no, because, you know, what's going to happen here is, as they go through the land development process, there'll be a land development agreement, and that fee will be memorialized in that land development agreement.
No, I think to Commissioner Larkin's point, and we had a development in, off Maplewood, and we had money set aside there for Odoricio Park. And so to the neighbors adjacent to this proposed build, I would not want to see that money, if this is approved, go into a fund and then be taken by a future board and used for something else outside of the neighborhood. And so I do agree with Commissioner Larkin that money should be set aside and should be used to improve your neighborhood around this development. A couple other questions. Condition 2, I think it was condition 2, this, or not condition 2, but it was this consulting consult with the neighbors on the facade. I mean, that's a nice to have, but there's no teeth in that. Like, the neighbors could meet with the builder, talk about, I mean, they could be unanimous in how they want the facade to look. The builder or the developer doesn't need to take their suggestions and put it into action.
Well, if, do you mind if I respond to that?
So my only point is, I think this, possibly could raise more tensions between the two groups.
Well, the goal is to make sure there's communication going on between the developer and the neighbors.
So how's it different from just having the monthly neighborhood meeting? And
I think that item 3 is what puts teeth in it. The building facade has to be consistent with the existing architecture of the Wayne Business Overlay District. And I suspect that if there is a neighbor group that comes to a meaningful consensus on what that means, this board will conclude that their consensus is what is consistent with the existing architecture of the Wayne Business Overlay District.
which also has to go through design review board and also get their approval.
Understood, but the applicant is going to have to go through land development. So
Yeah,
if all of the residents are saying we want to have a gray stone building and the applicant says, no, we want to have AZEK siding, I suspect that this board will say you're outside of your conditions.
Okay, I just, I think some of this is duplicative and unnecessary. And I think it gets addressed either through other conditions or through the normal process. To condition number 10, Mr. Norsini, that Mr. Falcone raised, is that a normal condition that we put on conditional use applicants
What's that mean?
for the study?
It's specific to, so each project is looked at on its own merits and differently. So there's no standards specifically for conditional use applications.
Okay. The rooftop, prohibiting, I guess the language is living space unless the board deems an exception. I mean, I would prefer that there be no exception allowed on that. I mean, the neighbors are already going to have an inconvenience with a build. I don't know that they want people outside, having gatherings overlooking their property. So, my thought on that is there should be no rooftop living spaces altogether. And then, again, I appreciate that the number of units has come down, and I like the overall theme and style of the proposal, but I still think it's a little dense for this area, and would prefer to see the number of units come down a few more.
Any further commissioner comment? Time to vote. All right, I'll call a vote on the 60 West GP conditional use decision to approve the proposed order prepared by the solicitor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, item C, authorization to draft an ordinance providing for revisions to section 280-53.17 of the zoning ordinance of Radnor Township relating to special use areas within the Wayne Business Overlay District. Commissioner Larkin, you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, so I asked if we could have the conversation about the board's, about the board's appetite to make revisions to the existing special use areas ordinance. I think that what we've heard from the public is that there's not an appetite to have 5-story tall, large buildings in this area. As it's currently drafted, the ordinance includes some provisions that give us the ability to put conditions on applications, some of which we've done in this instance tonight. But setting the ceiling forgive the pun, at 5 stories, and then saying, but we promise we'll come back and reduce that later on, consistent with our power to impose conditions, is really not ideal because it gives residents an unrealistic idea perhaps of what we can do in the future. And it also gives developers an unrealistic idea of what we are looking for from them. The developer in this case, I think very justifiably during the hearing, said, you said that we get up to 5 stories, so we'd like to do a building that's 5 stories. You told us what we could do. Why wouldn't you want us to do that? As a result, I think that what we probably should do as a board is take stock of what the residents actually want in this area, what we're willing to grant to developers in this area, create more measurable metrics, and then stick by them in the future. Instead of saying, well, you can do 5, but we'd really prefer if you do 4, why don't we just say, you can do 4, or whatever is the pleasure of the board. If we don't like the density, we can restrict the density. If we don't want 50 units, we can say 40 is the maximum. So my request is that we give this to the solicitor to come back to us with the draft ordinance. We can discuss it at the next meeting or whenever it's available to us, and ask the public for their feedback and then put it into our zoning ordinance.
Care to make that a motion?
Yeah, all those things that I just said in a motion.
I'll second it. Any commissioner comment? Solicitor comment?
Just one comment, because there's 2 other pieces, 2 other issues that have been around in terms of, that are related to this particular provision. And one is, there was a draft amendment that prohibited having more than one conditional use application on a property at any one time. So I would like to include that in this. And there's also, there's been some discussion about building height and also prohibiting elevator towers on tops of residential dwellings, single-family dwellings. Commissioner Abel brought it up, and I believe Commissioner Abel has spoken to Commissioner Larkin about that issue. So that would be a third issue to add to what I'll bring back, just so the board's aware. The conditional use amendment, there was some discussion about it, but it would just permit one conditional use at any one time on a property. So actually 3 things here. The special use district, the height issue, and then the multiple conditional uses on a property, which was already drafted. That ordinance was already drafted, but it makes sense to add to this particular ordinance, if the board's of a mind to authorize that.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So am I on? Yeah. I just had a question about the process. Commissioner Larkin, do you, are you looking for an ordinance to come forward and then we would have public input here at a meeting? Do you suggest holding, sort of a town hall to get people out to just talk about these issues? What do you think the steps towards this would be?
No, so I think that this is probably a 2-step process. The first is we have an existing gap in our zoning code in the sense that there is an immediate need that in the event a developer were to show up and say, we want, for instance, in the Wayne parking lot, the North Wayne parking lot, to put up a large condo building. That could happen tomorrow. We want to move quickly in order to close that door in our zoning ordinance. However, we also have a comprehensive plan process going on. We might discover during that comprehensive plan process that the residents are really fine with 5 stories, it's just that they want greater setbacks. Or the residents are fine with greater density, they just don't want it to be 5 stories, or whatever. We just need to have the flexibility to come back in probably 18 months, if I had to guess, maybe 24, and re-amend the zoning ordinance as part of the overall changes that are being made and revisit the decision.
And I think the authorization in this format would be to draft the ordinance and then circulate it to the board, make sure there's no issues with it, and then it would start through the Planning Commission process. It would go to the Planning Commission, the County Planning Commission, and when it's fully baked, it would come back to this board to be introduced. But those, the special use and those other 2 issues are hanging out there, and I think they ought to all be addressed for different reasons. in a zoning amendment. I'd like to, instead of advertising 3 separate things, if we can put them all in that one ordinance, I think it makes some sense.
No single subject rule?
No. Not for home rule municipalities, yeah.
Any further commissioner participation?
Sorry, just a comment.
What? He's beating the thing.
If that works. The special use areas, which is only in the Wayne Business Overlay District. And it was made 20-plus years ago with the large group of citizens and everybody coming together to do it. And they picked the 3, including the one that got approved, AT&T. North Wayne Municipal Lot, like that's public property, right? Part of it.
Part of it. I think that
Right.
most of it is owned by the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah. And then the South Wayne Municipal Lot, and back in 2007, they were doing a combo of an apartment building, a new library, a new senior center, parking, and also a public park down there. But it ended up getting turned down. Not that it got turned down from the board. There was enough interest for the people when the developer showed it to people. I don't think it even got to conditional use. It was more just kind of out there. But like when they made this, if I had to guess, they took a few years to come up with this. So I don't want to just end it as a quick solution. Like, I want to make sure we look at it.
Other commissioner comment? No, seeing none. Any public participation on this issue?
Just a point of order. Why are we having public participation if there's no vote?
We're going to vote.
But,
A vote to authorize.
but we shouldn't be having a vote if it says discussion and direction regarding outdoor dining.
No, it's the one above that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. My bad.
Hi, Joe Dow again. I'm not sure I'm following some of the technical procedure sort of steps that you're discussing here, but conceptually, I just would like to say that this starts to address a concern about the length of time the comprehensive plan will take to be formulated and reviewed and agreed upon, and sort of the sensitivity or exposure to activity in Wayne in the business overlay district that is not going to happen 10 times a year, that these sites don't come around and get redeveloped consistently. And so some of this conversation feels similar to the discussion of the project on Luella and Lancaster Avenue, where folks had different feelings and input that's maybe changed since the last comprehensive plan, but didn't have a lot of leverage to influence the discussion more broadly than just one site. So I don't know if the proposed sort of ordinance or changes you're discussing address that more broadly or only specifically on special use locations, but I would just ask the board to maybe meet with FHI Studio, look at early observations from the survey with the community, and then revisit what's currently allowed within the Wayne Business Overlay District and potentially tighten things up or enforce a little bit more control until the comprehensive plan is more fully formulated and agreed on. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other public participation?
Question?
Got to come up to the mic, sorry.
Well, I didn't know if my time was over or not. Oh, God, what was my question? So does this meeting tonight, does that mean that the gag order is lifted and we now can communicate with our commissioner, Mr. Larkin?
Yes.
Since you are the commissioner of Ward 1 and most of us are your constituents, and so we can now contact you and speak with you and the gag order is lifted.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. We voted. It's now hopefully done, but it's up to the Court of Common Pleas from
sorry,
here
what?
on out. Don't worry about it. I'll talk to you later, I'm sure.
Oh, that'd be fine.
Any further public participation? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. I'll call a vote on authorizing to draft an ordinance providing for revisions to Section 2053.17 of the zoning authorization to draft ordinance providing, I'm reading the same thing twice, ordinance of Radnor Township relating to special use areas within the Wayne Business Overlay District. Let's call a vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Item D, discussion and direction regarding outdoor dining. Mr. Larkin, I believe this is you as well.
This is me again. So as the board is aware, we had outdoor dining under tents all year round during COVID as a special concession to the businesses and restaurants all throughout the township. We ended that on December 31st of this year, and before we did, I called around within my ward and I asked the question of the WBA, is this something that you guys need to keep open? I called a bunch of restaurateurs individually, not all of them unfortunately because I don't have all of their numbers, but enough, and everybody told me that that was fine, they didn't have a problem with it, they all had made other plans. Then we sent as a township notices of violation to the people who still had their stuff out come January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and suddenly I started getting phone calls. Everyone had decided it was fine to take down the tents. A lot of people had forgotten that outdoor dining is only starting in March. So you got to take all of your tables and chairs inside. And so after I did some swearing in private, because I thought I had taken care of this, it does actually make some sense. Why should outdoor dining only happen in March? Because we have a lot of nice days. Today's a gorgeous day. It was 60 degrees out today. I'd be happy to eat outside today. A bunch of people have asked, could we make outdoor dining year-round? There's no reason not to do that, I think, in certainly the WBOD, but also in Garrett Hill, in the 5th Ward, everywhere in the township that has outdoor dining. Can we just say, if you're able to eat outside, you can do it the whole year? And then if it's inclement weather, you obviously need to do all of the things that we would normally expect you to do in terms of covering, getting snow removal taken care of. You're a private property owner. You'd have to do that no matter what, whether your tables and chairs are out or not. So that's my request. If yes, I'd like to work with the solicitor to come back with an ordinance for you guys at the next meeting.
Sounds good. Any commissioner comment?
I have. You want to go? No. I am pro outdoor dining. I enjoy it myself. I think, Jack, you and I have talked. I am anti-tent. I really don't want our community to be tented over. You know, our sidewalks and our trees and things like that I think are lovely, and tents get dirty and are not well cared for often. I would love to see the ordinance. I'm going to give you a nod. Yes, I'm in agreement that we should talk about it. The only issue I do have is that for some of these businesses, there's a pile of chairs sitting over in that corner, and that's what some of our restaurants now look like. So it was snowing. People were not sitting in the chairs. I've drove past one today where there's, you know, a jammed up pile of those like plastic Adirondack chairs. So they're not set up in a way that people would be able to use them. They're shoved in the corner, and they have, you know, tables and chairs, but the tables have an empty umbrella thing sticking up out of them, and it just looks like kind of my backyard, the way I keep my outdoor furniture. I don't have any place to store it, so I throw a cover on it or I shove it over in the corner. So I think if we have some restrictions about how the outdoor dining facilities look when weather is inclement, you know, that would probably be enough for me. But I do think that, I mean, probably the reason for having a seasonal outdoor dining ordinance was some of these issues where people were not maintaining. It doesn't, you know, it just doesn't look pretty. So, but I would love to have that conversation. I do have some restaurants in the 5th Ward that would be affected by it. I don't know if they would want to take advantage, but I would definitely be willing to go and talk to them. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I know for Garrett Hill, it just got approved somewhat recently. And some of it was the time, well, it's only, say, spring and summer and early fall. So I don't know, opening it up, if there may be another vote for that or something.
Any other commissioner comment? I love outdoor dining. Yeah. I like outdoor dining too. And you're only talking about places that outdoor dining is allowed now?
Yes, that was what I had in mind.
Okay. We don't have a vote, we're just talking, and I think you have a flavor of approval. Okay. Next is item E, which is a caucus, final land development plan for 150 to 168 East Lancaster Avenue, apartments and retail stores. Thank you for hanging in there.
Thanks. Nick Cornelia representing the applicant on this. This board's seen this a couple times before last year. It was granted preliminary plan approval. The Planning Commission has unanimously recommended final plan approval. Nothing really has changed with the plan. Probably the biggest change is the one regarding stormwater management, which you voted on last time, to provide more extensive stormwater management that would be in the right-of-way. This project's been going on for about a year and a half. It's in the WBOD. It's not a special use district. We are proposing a 3-story building, not a 4 or 5-story building. It complies with all the requirements of the WBOD. As I mentioned, this plan is very similar to what you've seen before as far as the preliminary plan. All the conditions being proposed by the consultant letters are acceptable, and we would request that we move forward with this plan. This is not in the special use district, by the way.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions?
When would the work begin?
Matt, I'll leave that to you guys.
It's my ward, so I
Sure, yeah.
want to know.
Fall of this year, late fall of this year, I think.
And what would you be, you're going to tear everything down? Is that the?
Sure. Well, we would look to demo the existing building. That would actually, we're looking to get that done this summer. And then new construction would begin in the fall of this year.
And I wasn't part of the board when this all
Sure.
was going on. So the traffic on Luella, what's the situation? What's going
Yeah,
on?
we may recall that this has been going on for like 18 months, and one of the first things we talked about with the neighbors were keeping the parking on Luella, and that is staying. That parking is staying. It was also a main concern of the church across the street,
Yep.
and so that parking is staying, and that all the residential will be parking underneath the building.
But I mean, the construction vehicles and all that, what's
Okay,
the deal?
I'll leave that up to Rob and Matt.
Our property line would essentially be fenced in
Mm-hmm.
during construction, so we would either have to park in public parking spaces, I guess those would be metered, which we would be paying for, or we'd need to find an off-site solution.
Wait, so you're saying, say that again? Where are you going to put them? Construction vehicles, where are they going?
Well, people working on site would have to park their cars, either they're going to park on the street in the metered spaces, or
I mean,
we
the
would have.
construction, the big things that are knocking
Oh,
buildings down.
those would be on site on our property or within the construction fence, or those 8 parking spaces along Luella, or the sort of 10 parking spaces that are in front of our property on Lancaster.
And so that's right near the middle school, so the kids will be, like, what's the safety issue?
Commissioner, I'll interject.
Just really quickly, yeah.
We informed the applicant that we're going to have to see a very detailed safety and demolition plan.
Okay, good.
That's not in hand yet, but that'll
Okay.
be part of when they get their permit.
Yeah, I wasn't part of it, so I just wanted to really quickly, because I get asked every day I run into somebody about it. I'm like, I don't know. So now I know. Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Norsini, will that have lead testing and the like included with it?
I'd have to defer to Andy Pancoast, our codes official. We did talk to the applicant about the granularity of the safety plan and the demolition plan. I would leave it to the codes folks to determine what gets tested and so forth.
Thank you.
Commissioners, and I can weigh in on that a little bit. There are multiple requirements from the state that puts the onus on the builder to take into consideration during demolition. So we would look at that during the application process for the building permits to make sure that all local and state and federal guidelines are being met with.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments, questions?
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Item F, the adoption of ordinance 2024-03, an ordinance of the Township of Radnor, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 270, Vehicles and Traffic, Section 270-11, prohibited turns at intersections by prohibiting left turns from Ithan Avenue to the Doherty Hall driveway. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, Chief?
Briefly, Board, this is the second time before you. Just to remind everybody, we had observed several pedestrian and vehicle conflicts due to the amount of traffic and events that occur at Lancaster and Ithan Avenue. By restricting this left turn, we believe we will make it very safe for the community and also reduce congestion in the township.
Thank you. Any commissioner comment? Any public comment? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
What would the new traffic pattern be? So people that are currently making that left, how would they now get to their final destination?
We are experiencing what we believe to be Uber and different drop-off drivers that are not familiar with the area. By seeing this sign, it'll be posted no left turn. They will now proceed down, Commissioner, to the next main entrance, which is guided. It has a lot more sight distance, as you're aware, at their main entrance. They can traverse onto the property much more safely and see pedestrians. And also, by not knowing where you are, or if a car pulls over the white bar and they nose in front of the Doherty driveway, it now, even if they know where they're going, they can't turn left because they're not even able to physically go through there because of the traffic overflow. So we're simply moving it down one more driveway. I think I'm answering your question. Is that it? Thank you.
Any other commissioner comment? Any public comment? Oh, more, you're on. You don't.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll call a vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Item G is ordinance 2024-02, the adoption of amending Articles 2 and 3 of Chapter 260 relating to the mercantile and business privilege tax, specifically the provisions regarding taxpayer responsibility for collection fees. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Mr. Tate, you want to lead us in on this?
Thank you, Madam President. This ordinance, as was introduced last meeting, is simply an update on the narrative and the language in the ordinance regarding the collection fees under the business tax for business privilege and mercantile taxes. It gives a broader definition and description and ability for the township to recoup collection fees in the event that there is enforcement action against a taxpayer.
Thank you. Any commissioner comment or questions? Seeing none, any public comment? All right, I'll call a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Item H, Resolution 2024-28, authorization of the payment of change order numbers 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 8 to G&B Construction Group Incorporated for additional aggregate, rebar, wood framing, and mill and paving, modification of wing wall pipe size and erosion control matting, and time extension for the Malin Road Culvert Replacement Project in the total amount of $41,113.99 to be funded from the Stormwater Fund. Mr. North, well, let me get a motion first. And a second? Second. All right, Mr. Norsini?
Thank you, Madam President. So this project is done. This is to finish it out and to close it out. We are well within the contingency amount we had specified for the project, and this is the summation of the change orders for the project. Like I say, it's complete. It's been complete for several months. This is the final closeout after we negotiated various change orders with the contractor. We respectfully request the board approve them.
Excellent. Any commissioner questions or comments? Any public participation? Call a vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Next item is reports of board liaisons. Anybody have anything to report? Seeing nothing. New business.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would like to just make an announcement about a speaker series that is being put on by the Board of Health. And the next event is coming up, and I am trying to get the details. Do you have that, Maggie?
It's an LGBTQ plus awareness series.
It is. It's the LGBTQ Information Panel, Community Updates and Identified Needs. It is going to be on the website. I can't find the date at hand, so I apologize. But one of the Board of Health board members was kind enough to send me the invitation to share out with our community. So hopefully in the coming months, we will be enjoying more of these community panels and speaking engagements.
Yeah, this is the second one in their board-approved series. So. Any other board liaison issue? Any new business? Any old business?
Yep.
Any?
Go
ahead.
Two issues.
Yeah. Commissioner Abel.
Questions are going to be for Mr. Norsini, so I'll sorry to interrupt. Just two updates. One, on the West Wayne Preserve. How's that project running, and are we still on track, or are we hopefully going to finish early? And then second question is, do we have an update on the South Devon Conestoga pedestrian crossing?
So to the first one, by allowing the contractor to work both West Wayne Preserves and front of the Radnor Trail Parks, they will finish earlier than originally anticipated. Both are on track. The majority of work left on the West Wayne Preserve is there is some earth moving yet to take place, and then planting. There'll be a spring planting and a fall planting. Over on the Fort side, the one stormwater management system is completely installed. They're working on the other, and then the final step there will be the porous paving that goes in there. So we are still on track for June, barring any issues. And the two projects, actually, there's the South Devon Conestoga crosswalk and the Sproul Clyde crosswalk. They're basically together, and we're working with Mr. Tate and the Finance Department to go through our capital projects and determine funding for all these.
So were you able to get approval from the apartments on the corner?
We're good on, yes, we have approval from the apartments, and we have our PennDOT permit.
Okay, so now it's just a funding issue.
Yes, sir.
Awesome, thanks.
Any other old business?
I'm going to use old business to amend my committee report. So thank you to my fellow commissioners. The event, the speaker series is March 18th at 6:30 in this room. I encourage everyone to come on out. Thanks.
Yay. Any final public participation? Careful.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. I'm not on EAC, but they are having a meeting on the 16th of March to introduce the community to solar panels. And it's a very important meeting, and I hope that a lot of people are going to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public participation? Seeing none? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
We're
All in
doing it.
favor.